wildfires in Oregon and Washington as well, but Oregon a lot closer to urban areas and areas that a lot of us live and work and serve. And when it happened, when we had those wildfires, I live in a suburb of Portland, and it was the first time I realized that, man, a disaster could actually hit close to my house and close to where I live. And when that happens, it sort of triggers a response, like, what do I do? How can I respond to this? How do I react? And one of the things that I quickly realized was, if you're not ready for it, you don't know what to do. And so you kind of just run around and hope you're doing the best and watch the news and follow the advice that the experts are giving you. But there isn't a whole lot of ways that we can jump in and help if we're not ready ahead of time. We felt this on a personal level. We also felt this on a district level. How can we serve our churches? How can we come alongside of our communities that were devastated by the wildfires? And so this got us a conversation going. And I think our hope with this training is that you would walk away not feeling overwhelmed about the prospect of a disaster, but with a sense that you can be better prepared. And it's not something that has to catch you totally off guard. There's no way we can totally be ready for any disaster that comes our way, obviously. But you can be ready. You can have relationships in the community. You can have systems in place to be able to respond and be the hands and feet of Christ in your community and through your church. So that's our hope. We're excited that you're here. We're going to start off this morning with a video that actually captures some of what happened when those wildfires hit the Pacific Northwest and specifically the Medford area. And so without further ado, we're going to show you this video put on by Comma Services.
We started seeing smoke coming in to my mobile home park in Medford, Oregon. I grabbed a hose and I thought, well, I'll spray my roof. I'll just defend my house. And my daughter called, no, that's ridiculous. You just got to leave, I left, and then at 2 in the morning, I got a call that your smoke alarm's going off. That's the time it burnt my house down at 2 in the morning on September 8th.
We had 43 people show up, the 2 mayors, one from Talent, one from Phoenix. We had representatives from United Way, from Red Cross, all showed up to say, hey, we're in this together. Let's get together and support this.
As kind of that first group to get everybody together, we became a center or hub for other members of the community to further help others.
It was in the early afternoon. I was actually driving this bus and I saw a puff of smoke start to come up south of our town. But our buses go into the trailer parks, go into where the apartment complexes are, and we bring them food. And when this bus pulled in here, hundreds of children hollered, "It's the bus, and it's bus driver Lee."
Lee goes through the areas that have been affected. He knows these families, and if he sees them, he say, hey, can I take you back to the expo? Can I take you somewhere, you can get help?
Yo no quiero llorar, pero estoy en la que era mi casa por 12 años. So como mis recuerdos se quedaron aquí.
Traffic was all stopped. We couldn't get out, and since I'm wearing an orange vest as a bus driver, they think I'm somebody in authority, and the people run up, what can we do, what can we do? I actually told about 25, 30 cars that were behind me, I said, if this gets closer, just follow me. We're gonna drive through these meadows. We're gonna knock down these, I'm sorry, but we'll be okay.
The best way to put it is Lee is the face of the I Care campaign. I'm the force behind it.
We contacted people and it went through our network of alliances. But in just the last week, we have given out over, I think we're up to, hey, Kevin, where are you?
As of this morning, $16,400 in gift cards.
Then we had someone donate $14,000 worth of haircuts. If we got a couple left, good, you need a haircut. All right, well, back to this. The I Care campaign is just starting because the needs are going to be here for a long time.
There's really two types of leadership in situations like this. We've seen the instantaneous response type of leadership. Then there are also those whose care is for the long term.
After the media is gone, after the press has died down, we are looking at is being here for the long term, the next month, next 6 months, next 2 years.
Because when the news cycle ends, the pain and the devastation and the loss is still here, even though we don't see it in the news anymore. If we can show that compassion and respect to everyone and build those bridges so that the truth of Christ can be shared, then there's nothing better in this world.
I used to think in my negative side, I don't deserve. Now he's showing me, I can hardly say it, you do. You not only deserve, but you're gonna get 3 times the blessing. Our God isn't the God that avoids the crisis. Our God is the God that holds our hand and walks us through the crisis.
We'll meet physical needs, but we care more about the soul. We're an Acts 1:8 family, right? That's what we do. We'll see a story come out of more and more people who experience Jesus Christ for the first time in their lives, even though they encountered him in perhaps the toughest or darkest night of their life.
That's a powerful story that brings it all very close to home. Thanks to Common Services for creating that video and coming alongside Medford Neighborhood Church to support that community. And I know a lot of that is still going on now. That care continues to this day. We're actually going to hear from Lee Gregory a little bit later in our time together, and he'll have updates on how that's going down there in Medford. Just a couple of housekeeping things. There's going to be some time for questions and answers. So if you've got questions, you can throw them into the chat, and we'll try to get to those kind of throughout the course of our time together. If you're not talking, which ideally one person's talking at a time on a call like this, please mute your microphone so that we don't hear you talking to your significant other or your dog barking. That would be great. And then the other piece is we're going to be done by 11:30. So we will honor your time in that way today. I want to introduce Phil Lohmeyer to you, who's going to be presenting and training today. Phil is the Comma Services Coordinator for U.S. Disaster Relief, which is kind of a big national title. But one of the things I've really appreciated about Phil is that he's also got this stuff is in his heart. It's not just a title, and he's doing it at the local level as well. So he's also the fire marshal at his local fire department in Centerburg, Ohio, which Phil tells me is right smack dab in the middle of Ohio. So he's serving in his local community as well as the Christian Missionary Alliance nationally. So we're just grateful to have Phil today. And Phil is an expert in this area of disaster relief. He's going to have some incredible things for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Phil now and let him talk to us about building our team and knowing our community.
Thanks, Jason. I'll try and share my screen here now. Hopefully we can get back to that. There we go. Yeah. I'm not sure if you're seeing my screen or not there. You are. Okay, great. Thank you. So as Jason said, I'm Phil Lohmeyer. I am the U.S. Disaster Relief Coordinator for Comma Services, and that's a mouthful, I know. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Comma is kind of the disaster relief arm of the Christian Missionary Alliance there, and it is well known overseas with international workers. And recently we've been trying to build capacity here in the U.S. to respond to disasters locally. I am not a technical person, so as I'm trying to share my screen, and my PowerPoint. There we go. I'm going to see if I can do this. Worked great in practice. There we go. So as I always say, as I'm responding to any disaster, prayer should always be our first response and not our last resort. We're always great at, when we're at the end of ourselves, praying for God to come in and help us, praying for Jesus's help. But why do we wait so long? So if you'll indulge me just a minute, I'll open us up in a word of prayer and we'll move forward this morning. Heavenly Father, we just invite you into our presence today as we talk about how to be your hands and feet in the midst of disaster. And as we talk today, we'll talk about being your hands and feet every day before the disaster strikes, so that we can continue to show your love, your grace to our communities, to our districts, to our nation, and throughout the world. So Lord, just be with us, guide us today. Let me lead well through this, and we'll let everything that we do bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen. So again, thank you all for your willingness to be here. I think we've got 20 some people here with us today, and that's awesome to see. So a little bit about Comma Services. Like I said, they've been doing this for years, and one of the things that we can do is we manage it through kind of 4 values, and that is first and foremost a Christ-centered compassion. If we can't bring Christ's love with us, we probably shouldn't be there, right? Community development, and again, we don't want to just come in, do, and leave. We want to develop that community and bring it back stronger, better, more in love with Jesus than it was when we started. We're all about local collaborations, and we'll talk about some best practices that we've learned throughout the years because of our mistakes that we might have made there. Something I want to bring to your attention, I know a lot of folks think about disaster response ministry or disaster response as just something that happens after a wildfire, after a tornado, after a hurricane. And really, it's something that's happening every day. In the Alliance, we talk a lot about missional living, right? And being hands and feet in our community where we're at, meeting people where they're at. So don't think of disaster response ministry as that break glass in case of emergency type of a thing, but rather we want you to think about it as we're going to provide relief to our community every day. And oh, by the way, when the disaster happens, we're already set up to start moving forward and continue bringing that response, that care, that Christ-centered, kingdom-minded care to our communities. So the first thing we need to do is get to know your community. And as I've traveled throughout the Alliance, and I love our Alliance family, but I've noticed that there are a lot of churches that unfortunately don't look outside the 4 walls of their church, right? So we need to look outside the walls. We need to look at who's doing great things in our community and how could we come alongside them. So, you know, what are the capacities and the capabilities in your community? I think the pandemic helped us to point out that folks that were doing a great job running a food pantry, doing, you know, other ministries were doing very well. But then when the pandemic hit and they had to double down and double their efforts because there was more of a need, they just didn't have the volunteers. They didn't have the resources to do that. So how can we as a church come alongside those organizations that are already doing great things and be a force multiplier for them? and again, I'll talk about the kingdom mindset. You know, if we're out there in the midst of a disaster and we're working alongside the Red Cross, we're working alongside Samaritan's Purse, we're working alongside the local Baptist church, and we're leading people to Christ, because that's one of the other things is our first and foremost responsibility is to bring people who are in crisis in touch with Jesus Christ. And if we do that, I don't care if they end up on Sunday morning sitting in an Alliance church, sitting in the Baptist church, sitting in the Methodist church. As long as they're following Jesus, that ought to be our goal. Now, yes, I would love for them to get connected with a local Alliance church and for us to be doing those types of things. But again, it's that relationship with Jesus and that relationship to the kingdom that we ought to be all about. So again, it's getting to know your community. You know, are there drug and alcohol problems in your community? You know, are there food shortage issues in your communities? So what are the greatest needs? And if you heard me speak before, you heard me say that we cannot be everything for everybody. So in the midst of a disaster, following a disaster, find those one or two things that your church can do, your community can do it well, and show Christ's love while you're doing it. And if you stay focused on those, you'll make an impact for Jesus, an impact for your community, and you'll change lives. And then we need to know our church. And the new Matthew West song, maybe it's not real new, but the song out there says, "Truth be told, the truth is rarely told." But, you know, I've been in and out of a lot of churches over the last several years. And sometimes we just aren't honest with ourselves about what our church can and can't do. And before we can embark on community outreach, community engagement, being part of a disaster ministry, we're going to have to sit down and have those difficult conversations amongst our leadership team. So we're going to need to talk about church finances. You know, where are we financially in our church? If you're not already sustainable in and of yourself, then you can't help other people. So, you know, first of all, do you have insurance on your building, on your properties? And if you do you have that deductible, which a lot of times is pretty large for our churches? Do you have that set aside in an account that you don't touch so that when you need it, it's there? So again, we're going to have those difficult conversations about finances. One of the other things we will have to talk about, especially when you get into disaster and you start receiving gifts and you start receiving money in, those funds kind of need to be kept separate and accounted for in a different manner. And we'll have a section of training in a couple of months here that will focus primarily on the finance part of that and some best practices. So I won't get into that too much, but just know that you're going to put some extra burden on your local church secretaries, your district folks that do these kinds of things, just in managing and maintaining the financial end of things and all those gifts that come along with it. We need to be honest with ourselves about our willingness to open our doors to the outside. We talk a good game about, you know, letting people in our churches and doing that, but we also have to have a comfort level there of, you know, what are we comfortable doing as a church, and what is your congregation going to be comfortable with? You know, we can open our churches up to be warming or cooling stations for folks. We can open them up to allow people to come in and charge their cell phones or use the internet to fill out, you know, FEMA applications. And there are a lot of great opportunities for us to use our facilities. But again, our congregation, our leadership team have to be supportive of that. Because I have been to churches where they start to cringe a little bit when folks come in and they're dirty and muddy and wet, and they maybe don't look like us, or maybe they sin a little differently than we do. You know, those things are there. And so we have to know what is our comfort level and be honest with each other about that so that we can do the best good that we can. And then we need to talk about our facilities. You know, what can we do? A lot of us have, you know, really great facilities that could be used for much more than that Sunday morning, Sunday evening service, you know, maybe a Wednesday service. So what else can we use that building for to help our community following a disaster? I know out in Paradise, California, I think the mayor and city council and everybody moved into the church out there for the most part. They opened that church up and they were able to continue running the government and doing things like that right out of our Alliance Church there in Paradise, California. But they had the resources, the mindset, and the ability to do that. I've also been to churches where, and we've all heard the stories of how we argue over what color carpeting we're going to put in the sanctuary, right? And those types of things. And we had a church that had great facility, had shower facilities for teams to come in and help work, but the leadership team couldn't agree on who was going to fix the plumbing so that they could have hot water. So again, those are difficult conversations that we have to have, but those are things that we have to use because that's not our building. Those aren't our facilities. That ought to all be kingdom property and be there for the use of our community, for the use of just furthering Jesus. We'll talk a little bit about our team and how do we start to build this team now that we've had the difficult conversations with our elders, and maybe we've had to rein the youth pastor in just a little bit, and those types of things. How do we build this team? What are we looking for? And we're going to talk about a district coordinator, and I almost took this slide out because I don't want you to think that when a disaster happens that the district is going to come in and they're going to bring a team and they're just going to solve all your problems. They will, and that may happen at some point in time, and they will be involved. But in the work that I do with FEMA, we always remind folks that disasters happen on a local level, and the response needs to happen on a local level. And we're here to help and we're here to assist, but that local church, that local community is where that relief's going to come from. You know, after any major disaster, you hear all the stories about, hey, the local church was here helping way before anybody else. And you know what? They're still here helping. And I think Lee will tell you some stories about that here in just a little bit. The other thing I want to remind you of is most districts don't have a permanent, regular, full-time, part-time, or anything else district response coordinator. I serve as the district coordinator for the Central District here in Eastern Ohio and West Virginia, but I'm primarily a volunteer. The district gives me $200 a month as a stipend and thank you, and they cover my expenses as I travel around to churches. But so we're working on building that capacity. And actually what I would rather see is have the district have the capability of taking any one of you 20 some people that are here today and that will go through this series and saying, hey, a disaster just happened here. We need you for a month or 2 months to help us do a temporary position and work some things out for us. So think of this position more as your lead disaster coordinator at a local church that could also work in the district. The key is, though, that they need to be someone who has a heart for people and someone who is compassionate and concerned about disaster ministry and helping folks following a disaster. our local coordinators, and these are the folks that are going to do kind of the lion's share of the work. They represent the local church, the local district, the alliance, as they go out into the community. We're there to make sure that the local needs of the community are met. And me coming in from Ohio and assisting or saying, hey, I'm here from the national office, I'm here to help. If I look past some needs that the church has that I'm just not thinking about, step up and tell us those types of things. So you're that connection back to the community, back to the local church. They may be responsible for helping to schedule teams that want to come in and help following a disaster if that's appropriate. Help with transportation, housing. Maybe you've got someone that says, hey, I'll step in and help take care of the financial part of this for a while and help the bookkeepers and the finance folks out. But your local site coordinator, that local connection is going to be important. In the same turn, your team leaders, which again are your local church members who will lead the teams of volunteers. They are going to go out with them every day. They're going to be that connection back to the community. I know, I'll talk about Hurricane Harvey in Houston several years ago. Obviously we had, that was a well-publicized disaster. We had a lot of response within the Alliance family. We had teams coming from Ohio, New York, all over California to come in to help. And that's great. We need that help, but we also need a local point person there. Because again, we want the community, we want the people that we're helping, we want that connection to be back to the local church. I don't need folks in Medford, Oregon, necessarily to have a relationship with Phil Lohmeyer. I need them to have a relationship with Lee Gregory and his team there. So again, as the teams come in to help, this local person is going to provide that continuity, provide that connection back to the local church. They're going to help before a disaster, building those partnerships with other churches, with the Red Cross, with the local food pantry, whoever that is, and maybe set up training. They're going to get together with the local government. What are the capabilities of our fire department in this town? Are we, a rural volunteer fire department, or are we a city big department? And knowing those capabilities of your community, again, are part of what they'll do. And you might ask, well, what person are we looking for? Who can fill this role for us? And I'll tell you, there are probably two skill sets, and they don't have to have both, but that we have found work well in this, and that's finding someone who either has a pretty strong background as a first responder, whether that's law enforcement, fire service, EMS service, and primarily more in a command role, so that they understand logistics, they understand movement of people and how do we manage people. The other skill set that we found that has worked really well and helped us in Houston is someone with project management skills. Again, we're managing resources, we're managing people. So as you're thinking through, some of you probably names are starting to flip into your head already. Oh, that would be a good, so-and-so, or Jim would fit in well there. Nancy would do this well. So again, just think of those folks that have those skills, those ultra organized kind of people that don't get flustered very easy, and they can adapt to change. That's who you're looking for to fill some of these team leadership roles and move forward in that respect. Some of the things that your local team leaders will do is they're going to give that kind of a welcoming and safety briefing to those folks that are coming to help, whether they're coming in for a day or they're coming in, to spend 3 to 5 days serving your community. They're going to give them that welcome briefing. They're going to make sure that the youth group that came in has something better than flip-flops on their shoes, on their feet. Bring some shoes with them and make sure they're being safe while they're out there working. They're going to need to know the community and know how to get around when roads are blocked and you can't get through. It's surprising how many folks know how to get from point A to point B, but if you make them go to somewhere else first, they can't get back there. If you interrupt our normal flow, we get flustered and we can't figure that out. So these team leaders, these folks are going to have to be very familiar with the community. How do you get around if you need to? Of course, in Houston, you might have to take an hour detour to get around to get from Katy to Baytown or vice versa. And it was almost an hour drive normally to get there. But knowing the roads, knowing how to get around, knowing your community there. And along with that, the people that are going to give these welcome briefings, give these safety briefings, go out with the teams. They need to be an advocate for disaster ministry. They need to be an advocate for your church, for the Alliance. I would say they need to be disciple makers. And probably the most important skill that I would love to see each of them have is, can they lead someone to Christ? Because I think even in the video, it mentioned that when we can provide answers in the midst of chaos, and the answer is Jesus, and people want to get to know Jesus, can we lead them to Christ? And can we walk them through that process? So that's maybe a whole nother training in and of itself to talk through and walk through with folks. But being able to do that and have those conversations with folks is vital, because you will have people that will want that and need that, and that's what we're there for. Your team leaders are going to provide kind of a daily touch base and make sure that we're meeting some psychological needs within the teams that come out, and even within your local team there. Because unfortunately, you're going to see things, hear things, and smell things that most people have never seen, heard, or smelled in their life before. And we need to be able to walk people alongside that. We do at church camp, we do it all the time. At the end of, we talk to our youth group about, hey, what were your highs and lows? Where did you see God at work today? What broke your heart today? And you will see those in the midst of a disaster. And I'm not afraid to admit that, yes, I still had a tear in my eye as I was watching the video there, and having been there in Medford. It will break your heart. And I've seen grown men break down in tears as we're going through following a hurricane. And one gentleman, there happened to be a piano out on the street, and he just broke down. And we're like, are you okay with it? He goes, it just made me think that the only thing we have left of grandma's is this old piano, and it's not worth anything. We don't even play it anymore, but if we lost that piano, how would that make us feel? On the same turn, we've had folks go through, and as you come through after a tornado, all the kids' toys and stuffed animals are in a pile in the front yard. They're wet and ruined and destroyed. And it makes you think about your kids back home and how you're missing them and those types of things. So again, having those opportunities every evening to get together as a team. And I would say you can have the teams that are coming in, work together, and in your local team, touch bases back together as you go on, and make sure we're meeting those needs. And we'll talk more about psychological needs in another session, and meeting those, and how to do some psychological first aid types of things. But for the most part, people just need to get it out. We need to tell our story, get it out, and then we can process and move on. I seem like I'm talking really fast, so I apologize, but we'll, you might want to identify another local team leader just to take care of the maintenance of the church and the property. We all have folks that come in and do that on a regular basis, and maybe, they come in on Monday and empty the trash and clean the restrooms. But if you have people in the church 5, 6, 7 days a week now, as you're doing relief following a disaster, you may need somebody else to come in and give them a hand. The teams will clean up after themselves and do that, but somebody might need to come in and wipe down the showers and do a few other things. You might need someone to help coordinate meals. Is there even food available in the community? So do we need to have the teams bring their meals and food with them? Are we going to provide some meals? So just some things to think about. There are a lot of moving parts here that have to happen to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, taking care of our people, and managing as we move forward. And then don't forget about Joe and Joanne, just our local, couple that sit in the pews, and maybe they're in their 60s, 70s, and they can't get out and be with the team. They can't do that, but there's something that they can do to help. Can they help provide some meals? Can they do laundry for a team that's been there for a while, so they don't have to take their dirty, muddy clothes home with them before they go home? Just those types of things. Anyone who has a heart for Jesus and wants to help, let's find them a job to do as we move forward. Now, not everybody's cut out for every job, and not everybody can do every job, but we'll find something for everybody to do as we move forward. And then I think my last slide is a big question mark. So I will open it up now to some questions. If somebody has specific questions, we'd be more than happy to try and answer those for you.
Just a reminder to everybody, if you do have a question, either put it in the chat or unmute. And Phil, you're opening the floor for people to ask questions like the way I'm talking right now, yeah?
Correct, yes, please
Awesome.
do.
Okay.
So Phil, I've had times where I've asked people if they have any questions and it's just silent. I would like to give you a compliment, and I don't have a question because you've communicated things so clearly for me. So I just want to say I don't have a question, but I did hear your invitation.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Again, if you have questions that come up in the future, or you're walking through things with your team and you're trying to build your team, and you're having some hard moments, feel free to reach out to me. The district, they have my information there. I should have put that on a slide with my email, but it's my last name, Lohmeyer, LOHMEYER .cma@gmail.com. So if you have any questions, anything I can help you with, certainly feel free to reach out to me. More than happy to come into a leadership team meeting via Zoom or whatever it takes to help come alongside each of you to do that, and maybe look outside the box with you as you're doing things there, because I know sometimes those are difficult conversations to have and walk through together.
So I have one question. As you were talking about the roles on a team, how many of those roles in a and I don't know if there is such a thing as a typical disaster, but how many of those roles have you filled prior to the disaster? And then how many of those roles, what are those roles, how many of those roles are created once the disaster happens, if that makes sense?
Sure. That makes perfect sense. Most of those roles are filled after the disaster happens. And a lot of times we're a little behind, quite honestly, because we think about it more as break glass in case of emergency rather than we're already doing community outreach. But in the same term, we don't need somebody to clean the church 6 days a week. So just finding that person, that just happens after the disaster. We don't all have people that can go around and do training in advance of that, throughout a district or throughout a region, even though we're working on it. So again, most of those are filled after a disaster. I would say most of our district coordinators are all, it's just a temporary position for that time. And there, somebody in the district office has disaster response in the back of their mind and they're preparing for that, which is great, but it's not necessarily a full-time permanent position where somebody's there all the time. I would love to see each church have somebody dedicated to community outreach and just building those relationships with their local first responders, those local groups, and be the person that coordinates, say, a first responders day lunch or something, at your church, and those types of things would be helpful. And just coordinating things like first aid training, CPR, those types of things. Okay, well, hearing no more questions, we'll move forward, and I get the pleasure to introduce Pastor Lee. He says just call him Lee, but I know him as either Pastor Lee or bus driver Lee, as I met him out in Medford driving his bus in his orange vest. And I think Lee will bring some perspective to each of us on kind of how to do it right. And he had those relationships built ahead of time. He was engaged with his community so that when the disaster happened, he just had to put the plan into motion and ramp things up a little bit and keep moving forward. So, Kevin, it's good to see you. I didn't see you on there earlier. Lee's right hand there, and I think between the two of them, they'll have some great stories to tell. So, Lee, I'll give it over to you.
Thank you, Phil. And the data you shared with us, Phil, is essential to have. So I trust we have it in notes, and every person who wants to remember some of those steps, access to your notes, correct? Also, is everybody hearing me okay? Thumbs up. I'm on vacation right now, a little vacation. It's spring break for our schools, so I'm not in a school bus today, and I will be by Monday of this coming week. And I would like to say hello to the Alliance family who are here, or whatever access you had to us, whoever you are, thanks for coming. Phil actually introduced me in a way that I have to say is a little bit inaccurate. Yes, I'm a bus driver. Yes, I'm a senior pastor. And I want to give you a little background because it's a God thing. I had no plan, no desire, no initiative to be a disaster response pastor in the Southern Oregon area. It just happened, okay? Now, for me, it just happened. I do want to let you know I've been a school bus driver in our region for the last 14 years. And as a school bus driver, being a senior pastor first, the ministry always takes priority. So I've been a substitute driver. Now, the consequence of that for the last 14 years, I've driven every school bus and every type of bus route that we have in 3 school districts in these 14 years. Does that help you get to know neighborhoods? Does that help you get to meet children? COVID-19 stopped all the transportation of students, but we were delivering food to students in different locations. And make the long story short, that made it so we actually got to talk a lot with students and families and meet them in their homes and their neighborhoods, bringing them food over the past year. See, I wasn't planning on being a disaster response pastor. And I'm going to get tears. I can't stop because this type of meeting is forcing us to go back. So I didn't plan on doing what we're doing, but I'm so glad God had plans I didn't see. I hope you picked that up. God allowed me to know my community in ways, and I knew I should be a school bus driver. I knew that was part of my actual ministry as a pastor. The congregation finally accepted that. For a few folks, they wanted their pastor to simply be in an office most of the time and at their beck and call. Well, I'm not that kind of person. I need variety. I need to get out, and I love to go fishing as well as help others learn how to fish. So I love to go be fishers of men as well. So I've been out in the field, knowing our community, didn't plan on it for disaster response. I was on a school bus. It was November 8th, 2018, November 8th, 2018. And on a school bus in the early morning, picking students up from school to take them home on an early day. My phone rings and it's my wife calling me saying, honey, our hometown is on fire. It sounds like our families are having to evacuate. November 8th, 2018. She said, can you come? And normally I could get on a radio and say, I need to be relieved from this task of being a bus driver. But the dispatch said, we can't relieve you, Lee. So I stayed on the bus as the fire in Paradise was going, where we had relatives who had to evacuate, including my wife's parents, elderly parents. As the day progressed on that day, I got more reports of the fire was real. I was born and raised in the town of Paradise. My wife had been there since her childhood days. We've been told our town was vulnerable to fires, but all of our years of growing up, but we put them all out. Well, not on this specific day. The town did get creamed by fire, 50,000 people displaced. And of course, we felt it firsthand and up close. And again, I wish it was my great disaster response that would have led me, but it's because I was closely related to those who were in loss. On the school bus, a bunch of children said, how's your day going, bus driver Lee? Because they hadn't seen me for a while. I was substituting that route. And on that bus, a bunch of children started saying the word, we want to know more of this story. Tell us, we care, we care. We kept using the word care. And Kevin, if you could slide a little to the right, that was the birthplace of the I Care campaign. On this bus, a bunch of children were saying they cared, and we decided, I said, well, what do you mean when you say you care? What should we mean? And when the word care came out, we gave an acronym. We turned it into an acronym on a school bus with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and CARE stands for us, compassion and respect for everyone. Now, since I've got a bunch of leaders here and people on there, that's a biblical truth that God calls his people to. That's a Jesus's command to his followers, that we will show love to everyone, no matter what, whether we agree or disagree. And so while I don't live up to it perfectly, I do know that's his standard. And CARE became the word we rallied behind. And in fact, in response, we knew from the Paradise Fire, people would be displaced by it. And we knew many would choose to move to Southern Oregon area. Those were just things we knew were going to be the trends. Now I got to tell you about the local church known as the Medford Neighborhood Church. We're not a mega ministry. We don't have a bunch of plurality of staff, and we don't have 500, 400, 300 people to pull from to lead a response. We're about, at this time when that fire happened, we're about 150 to 175 people a part of our congregation. So you don't have to be big to care, and you don't have to be big to start a response in the time of a crisis. Well, make a long story short, we allowed the property, we found a big open space, and we just knew people would be moving in our area. So we got them. This does take some steps of risk. I just drove to a TV station, a local one, and I said, hey, I knocked on the door. And I said, I'd like to let the community know that we care. We're starting a movement called I Care. And care means we're willing to show compassion and respect to everyone, especially who've been hurt in this crisis. Well, what happened immediately, within days, other churches joined us, other ministries, congregations, and not just churches, organizations. And then the Paradise Fire, as a result, within a 6-month window, we helped 152 households land and move in the Southern Oregon area. Is that correct, Kevin? And you're gonna have to unmute Kevin. Yeah. Kevin really knows the numbers. And as you've talked about having a staff or a team, we call it the care force. Kind of a little different terminology. The words teams and staff are used a lot. And Kevin was one of the first men in our church who wasn't doing a whole lot. He was a slacker. Could hardly get him. He was not, but I do know this. Here's the first type of person I look forward. Everything you said, Phil, I'd agree. We didn't know it on purpose. So I just knew Kevin, I would call, is a protector. And I think most of you can look around your ministries and find the protector in your midst. Kevin is not the would not be the one who would talk a lot or quick, but he does have emergency response background. He does have all those type of tools. And as a pastor, if there's a crisis in our midst, I look to Kevin and people like him, and Kevin just stepped in. But he hasn't stepped out now because I said I Care started on November 8th, 2018. We did not plan on having to reactivate the Care Force again. We knew it was a movement. See, when it first happened, the schools jumped all in. They said, we want to join the Care Force. Would you come and teach our students? Especially being a bus driver, I had that access. We want the word care. We love what you've done with it. Will you teach our schools? And in this very day now, currently, we did not plan on having another fire so close to home, where 2,352 homes were destroyed, families vacated on September 8th, 2020. September 8th. I don't know if I like the number 8 very much anymore, but those days. And on that, we had already done the I Care campaign for Paradise. It had had its time. It was very busy for the first 6 months, swamped in the first 3 months. After 6 months, it slowed down enough. We actually ended up going to Paradise, California with a trailer load of all the donations that had been given to us. And we took it right down to the city of Paradise. They still had needs long-term. And we even had funds left over where we gave the Paradise Alliance Church a $7,000 some odd change check. Is
$7,450.
See, something like that. See, and by the way, that's the accountability part. One of the first things that happened, let me take you quick to September 8th. The fire happened. I was actually driving bus that day, and it was the first day of school, but we couldn't have school. So we're taking food to the very places, to the very facilities you saw totally destroyed. And that fire happened. I do want to, pastors and leaders, you got to take care of your immediate family. You got to take care of others. But if you're going to respond to disaster, some of us have to stay at the disaster. I was actually asked by family and friends, including relatives who had to vacate and evacuate Paradise, California. They had to evacuate this time too. And they kept saying, Lee, are you coming? Lee, are you coming with us? And I said, nope, I'm staying back, guys. I get teary-eyed because not everybody could run from the crisis. I did get to stay back. Of course, the lady, some of you met my wife who's with me here. She took the family and they had to flee the community. They had to flee the area. 3 different cities had to evacuate. And as they're fleeing, little connection being a bus driver for so long, the manager of our bus yard is a lady and she goes to our church now through the process of just being in the community. And we have an ongoing thing where it's just simple. If I just say the church is now being rented, the bus is being rented by the church, I have full access to it. So I drove that bus into the fire, drove right down into the fireways, and the local authorities allowed me to drive in to pull people out. One of the things that happened in our November 8th fire here, the Almeda fire it's called, emergency notices were not sent out. There was not an emergency broadcast that warned people. That's a thing, just let you know, side note, not all disasters are even called disasters at the beginning. And they didn't have an emergency notice. So literally I'm driving a school bus right into the fire areas. Fire engines are flying around me. And I'm picking up people as they're running out of their parks and their homes and running for their lives. Filling up a bus. But while I'm doing that, I know there's going to be, here's come simple. So here's, Kevin said in a video, I'm kind of the shaker and the mover. And he's the one who really has to get his hands dirty, and so do others so much. I drove up to a camera crew immediately, right up to a camera crew that came out that, they're out for the emergency. And that took some steps. I mean, I'm thinking, man, should I do this? Should I not? And there's no real, so I'm just saying the shaker movers, don't be afraid to step up. And I drove up to a camera crew with a bus, jumped out, and I hollered over to the camera crew, and they're looking for a story. I said, hey, we're going to reactivate the Care Force. And because of the prior emergency that had happened a year and a half earlier, that's why we had a foundation and we were known. And immediately, just by saying we're reactivating the Care Force, churches all around, everybody, they understood that name. And they rallied. Sorry, Kevin, what happened from there?
Basically, just to fill in, can everybody hear me okay? This is the first time I'm using this computer for a Zoom call. Basically, the night of the fire here in Medford, I was sitting in my truck. We had just loaded up important church documents, and it was about 11 o'clock at night, and I got a phone call from a lady asking if we were going to reinstate the care force. She had donated to the Paradise Fires and was wanting to know if we were going to reinstitute, and I said, yes, we are. And Lee wasn't sure if he was going to have a home. We weren't sure we were going to have a church, and I wasn't sure if I was going to have a home by the time this got done, because we were right on the edge of the evacuation zone. So through that first contact, Lee went out there. We had the news crews the next day, and one of the things that we did as a church, I started calling members that I knew had good phone voices. I said, can you get down here? We need to get community leaders together. And we made calls to United Way, Salvation Army, American Red Cross, the mayors of all three of the affected cities. And we held a meeting in our sanctuary on the Friday after the fire. Now, this fire happened on a Tuesday, I believe. And we were able to get all these community leaders together to coordinate what our efforts were going to be. And it was a great turnout, and a lot of suggestions and a lot of cooperation came out of that meeting.
Yes, and as Kevin's saying that, that was probably one of the most important elements that took place, that we had information from the prior emergency. That first item we said was, as we gather here, we're here to coordinate so we can notify our communities how to respond in this time. At the Paradise Fire, for instance, generous people wanted to donate so much that immediately, within just a few days of that terrible fire, furnishings and physical donations flooded the area, but Paradise didn't need them, couldn't accept them. So they ended up on a Walmart parking lot. We're talking an entire massive parking lot just loaded with donations. And then that being November, the rains came and everything got ruined. Literally, the city of Chico, California had to bring all their garbage trucks and road crew tractors and haul it all to a major landfill. So much that was donated. So we communicated with our local agencies how we would respond, where we could respond. We set back to let the pros talk, like Red Cross and others. They were just thrilled to have a place where they could rally all the leaders together immediately. And as a result, going back to what type of crew do we have or would we have, that was really interesting. We didn't have much of a crew really to begin with. There's 5 or 6 of us. But the reality is, when you step into the needs, as the needs arise, you'll discover, Lily, God provides the crews. I believe that. But at the same time, people step up. For instance, I don't speak Spanish. About 70% of those who lost everything were from our Hispanic community. We never had a problem with translators because they were the ones out displaced too. So wherever we set up a place to provide care, they always provided us our translators. Oh, by the way, for the record, thanks to all of our churches, thanks to all the different donors. Kevin, how much in gift cards have we distributed to people at this time?
Okay, so far today, so far today on this fire, we have handed out $111,000 worth of gift cards and other support. And I say other support, because we have paid cash for things like prescription drugs, eyeglasses or something in that area.
To all of us who are listening, I do want you to know that what we found a niche we got to do that was really, that other agencies couldn't do. And the agencies have actually spoke to us and said, they hope the next crisis, iCare shows up, because we actually did what the other agencies couldn't. We filled a gap, and here was the gap we filled. We filled a gap where people would come and they had personal needs, the personal prescription, the personal immediate medicines, the personal health foods or things that they had as allergies, or clothes that would actually be personal clothes. So when people come to us, we would show care by saying, what is it we can help you provide that you can't get from another source or agency? And that's how we actually dealt with our local businesses, which was also something we didn't plan on, but it was great. Local businesses are the ones who suffer because of a disaster. Our local businesses, that's who we bought gift cards from and helped their business survive. So right now, I want you to know our local businesses If there's another crisis, they're going to know iCare comes in. They want to give. One more thing that iCare did that other agencies aren't able to do, we would vet or investigate a person's story to make sure that what was being donated was being given to people who were survivors of a crisis. We live in a culture today where a lot of people are on our streets, or the donations aren't designed for them. They can get their personal needs met at other locations. Hope you understand what I'm saying. We have a lot of people who are dishonest, and other agencies just have to give. They do under their mandate, under their policies. We vet people to make sure that the actual people who get supported are people who are the survivors of a crisis. One more point I want to say about iCare that is, while you've heard two terrible disasters and they were big, actually the iCare force can be activated when one family has a disaster. When your community, one house burns down. When somebody has a death, you can find out that, I'm sorry. That's why for me, iCare is no longer just a response that happened for the Paradise Fire. iCare is no longer a response simply for Southern Oregon. iCare can be a way we move as a people together. In fact, if somebody in your region has a major crisis, wouldn't it be nice if we could let it out over the district network? Hey, we have a crisis up here, and your care force directors can call each other and say, how can we help? And many of you, I don't know if you know this or if you were the ones in charge, we receive many donations from our different alliance ministries that are throughout our district, and from the district office too. And Phil Lohmeyer, one more thing to say about our commissary. I don't know if they can do this all the time, but we announced to our community that every cent of every donation would be given to people who were the survivors of this crisis, every cent. So guess what we didn't budget for? How do you administrate this when you have literally the demands are so great? We have given out over $100,000 in gift cards. We have to collect them. We have to sign for them. We have to, as we deliver to someone, we have to verify their story and keep personal records. And we've been doing this for the last 6 months. That takes a lot more time. And I want to thank and thank our district. You guys did respond by helping us have some funds to pay for the administration of a response. Because it does take, like you said, for the time of the crisis, we needed more of a crew. I hope I didn't take too long with that. That was about 15 minutes. Did that answer enough of a questions or share some of a story? I'm open.
That was great, Lee. Thank you for sharing. I love when you talk, Lee, because it's what's coming out of your mind, but it's also what's coming out of your heart. And thank you for sharing your heart. You don't have to apologize for tearing up. It's moving, man, and it's an awesome story. Thanks, Brian. I agree. Phil,
can I say something? I have a thought here, though. I think it's very important. I'm speaking as a pastor from the scriptures. I believe we're living in unique times, and there's Bible may call these perilous times. So whether the disaster is one house or lots of houses, a flood or a broken heart somewhere, or a lady who's all by themselves and can't get their help done around their house. Perilous times mean this is what we're doing here, I believe, is extremely important for all of our ministries and for being better prepared to reach the people. Because one of the biggest questions people ask is why? Why would a loving God allow this disaster this time? And I'm telling you, we got to experience firsthand. God grows and God moves in disasters. God teaches in disasters lessons you can't learn anywhere else. And I have never had more opportunity to just have spontaneous prayers with people by their invitation than in disasters. And you see Kevin bobbing his head over there, that old crusty guy and these other guys that are our disaster response crew. Sorry, but I have to say, sometimes you can almost look forward to what happens in the midst of disasters. So perilous times are coming, folks, still. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Kevin. Again, questions, if you have specific questions for Lee, for Phil, for Kevin, put them into the chat, and we want to try to get those answered before 11:30. But Phil, I'm going to kick it back over to you. and let you keep going.
Okay, well, I don't have much more unless there are questions, but I do want to tell one story on Lee. And for those of you that didn't hear me before, just a little bit of my background. I have 22 years in law enforcement, going on 30 years now in the National Guard and that. And so I don't scare easy, I guess I would say. But when we were in Medford, we went out to dinner. I think it was Applebee's, and Lee may not even remember this, but it speaks to just being opening to that voice of the Holy Spirit and stepping out in faith to do that. But this group of guys who had come in on their motorcycles and they had all their motorcycle garb on and were a little intimidating looking for most of us. Lee just felt led to follow them right out the door and stop and talk to them. And he shared the story of the I Care campaign and stopped and prayed with them and took an opportunity and then came back in and finished dinner with us. So that's the kind of courage that it takes to step out in faith and just listen to the calling of the Holy Spirit and do what's being asked to be done from each and every one of us. So that was impressive for me, and it opened my heart a little. So I appreciate that.
Kevin, thank you, Phil, for, yeah, I remember that now. That's why I remember that. No, Kevin, we would like everybody to know that if I care is a concept that you might want to rally with, care. What we actually invite people, it's not just that we respond by helping people. We invite everybody we help, at least we try to, every person we get assistance to, we invite them to join the care force. They don't have to pay dues. They don't have to give anything, except they have to be willing to commit to show, what are the words, folks? Compassion and respect to everyone. And there's a pledge we actually do. We could show you. In fact, Kevin, you're making a video that gives the I Care story, correct?
Correct.
And it will be available to anybody who requests. It's not that we want to tell the story. We want to let you know you could create a care force in your area. I do believe this is going to turn into a type of movement anyway, because our public schools have invited us in. Can you imagine being invited in to the secular culture that we have today to teach people about how to show compassion and respect to everyone? So our pledges, and we've got pictures of police officers taking the pledge, gang leaders, motor groups, all these different folks saying, in this crisis, we're here, we pledge, we will care. Or that's why they have a little sticker everyone can wear, I care. And you know, that's a person who's gonna show you compassion and respect. There's a cat behind your head, that's awesome. Okay, well, in any case, what makes this unique is even the people who get assistance become a participant if they want. Kevin, have you ever had someone say they didn't want to join the care force?
To date, we have never had anybody not join the care force that came in for assistance. So it has been a fantastic response by the victims themselves.
They leave with a sense of purpose, no matter what. I mean, they've received something. And by the way, on the average, we give people about $100 in immediate response care. They can take those gift cards, go to the local stores, get their medicines, buy fuel. You know, some of our stores have fuel, whatever. But we've had stories where one lady, an older lady came up and she goes, are you with the I Care campaign? I said, yes, ma'am. She goes, I got to tell you about my son. You guys helped him. Thank you so much. And I said, well, that's an honor. That's a pleasure. And she goes, no, I need to tell you the rest of the story. He had his gift cards and he saw someone else who had more need than he did. So he gave them gift cards. My son's never done that, never been generous. And she said, I asked him why he did it. He goes, well, now I'm a member of the care force. Now, these aren't people who we will gladly bring the message of Jesus alongside. That's why we're there. But people just start recognizing care is contagious too. So I want to let you know, if you want to know anything about the care force, you can contact us at Medford. How can they contact us, Kevin? Go ahead. What's the address?
You can contact us at medfordneighborhoodchurch.org. Follow the email links, or you can go to edge.mnc.gmail.com.
And that was a long one.
With all the things I have to remember around here, I'm surprised I actually remembered it.
That's right.
We have a question, guys, and maybe this is a question. It might be a Kevin question. This one came from John. John says, as Lee mentioned, filling gaps and that other agencies could not. Lee, you mentioned helping individuals with prescriptions. How was iCare able to do that? And I think John, it's a logistics question. Like, how did they go about actually doing that? Yeah.
Okay, generally, if they call and they said they have a prescription, and I will ask them, do you have a pharmacy already selected? Do you have a place where you can get it filled? If it's for like Fred Meyer's, Walgreens, something of that nature, Walmart, we generally have gift cards for that. If it's for an off pharmacy like Rite Aid, which we normally don't carry gift cards for, we will contact the pharmacy, tell them who we are, and say, this person needs to fill a prescription. Can you give me the price of it? I said, without giving personal information, I'm going to send them down there with cash and just make sure they get a receipt to bring it back to me. To date, I have only had one person not bring me a receipt back for a $4 prescription. So I figure I'm doing pretty good odds on that. The same thing with glasses. I called the optometrist and said, hey, how much is it going to cost to get these glasses filled? They gave me a price. We send them with cash, or sometimes I've had to write a check, and they've always brought me back receipts. So I would say 99.9% of the people that we have assisted, they have been honest. They, have gone out of their way to make sure that our county and accountability is kept up to par, and they understand that because we are very accountable in what we do.
That's great.
What
I think
yes, you're okay. What Kevin's
I think that's
can you hear me?
I think that's a better rate of return on receipts than Julie gets from the Alliance Northwest District staff, probably. Go ahead, Lee.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay,
go ahead.
I should say, Kevin, here's something that does happen when you're doing something long term. Kevin and I both take phone calls of people who have needs. His number we freely access, and my personal number is freely accessed. So Kevin has some different ways he gets to respond. But as for me, I'm often, when there's unique types of needs, I call the provider directly and I do the direct purchase. I don't exchange gift cards or cash under those needs very often at all, because I can just prepay for people. Once we verify these are people who are survivors of a crisis and this is truly a need they have, as long as we have resources, and we do, like we said, we've provided, thanks to generous donations, over $100,000. I keep saying that because it stuns me still, but we have over $50,000 in reserve right now that is designated for survivors. They start to move back in as they start to do their landing and have other needs. This was really a big response, or this need was responded to in great ways through generosity. But I respond by prepaying quite often for the folks. So I already have a record, and all people have to do is give their identification to the service providers or the agencies that are helping them.
That's good.
Another thing we've done as the crisis went on in time, the crisis needs that happen in the first few weeks of a crisis are strikingly different than how you would need to respond in the weeks that follow. That's not I'm not going to go in detail, but you have to do this emergency response. We set up a station right at the fairgrounds within 3 days of the fire here.
3 days.
Red Cross had already set up, and other national emergency responders, FEMA was there. But the local people had heard about, the local providers had heard about iCare because of the Paradise Fire. They said, oh, come sit here, please. And they put us right in the center. That's what happens I just want to say, that's what happens when you have some longevity. So don't be surprised. First time you respond, people don't know you too well, but they sure need help. And if we're just there to serve and help, but when there's a second crisis, they know the ones who that helped in. So I know this, we are better prepared for the third crisis that will happen. So.
Yeah, that's good. What other questions do you all have before we wrap up here? Your window is closing on questions.
I would like to make a statement before we end this, though. Phil, has worked on natural disasters and things, hurricanes, floods, earthquakes. There's an amount of recoverability to those disasters. You can find certain property, you can find things, papers, things like that. Fire, and I am a former firefighter, paramedic, is one of the most devastating fires that there is. One of the things that we had learned from the Paradise Fire, and we already had in place, is local numbers for people to call to get ID, to get, their Medicare cards replaced, things of that nature. Because in a fire, especially this one, where so much was destroyed because of the intensity of the fire, there was very little left of these homes. If you saw the video, it was basically frames and that was it. So having all that information in place before the disaster strikes is very, very important.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions at this point. So this has been very helpful, very good. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Kevin and Lee. And I want to just thank Julie Heath, because she loves to be recognized and celebrated so much. But Julie has been the muscle behind all this training and coordinating this. We have another one coming up. It is April 22nd. So be sure to put that down. We're going to be talking about team dynamics and problem solving. So a little different emphasis. Julie, do you have to come to the first one to go to the second one, or can other people come and plug into this?
Nope, there are different topics each time, so everybody is welcome to join at any point. They are different topics, so we hope everybody can come to each one so that they can hear the different information that is able to be presented at each different one. So.
Awesome. So these are standalone. So if you have somebody that you want to bring along and just send them a link to the invitation, it'll be on the Alliance Northwest website. And thank you, Rachel. Rachel is A&W Tech. Rachel and Emily are making this happen today. So thank you both. And
Jason?
Yeah, Lee.
Jason, I just want to say, anybody who would like to have, look at Kevin again, if you guys can look at him, he's wearing a hat, we have shirts. This is all part of us just trying to look alike as we're responding to needs. If anybody's interested in having we're doing an information packet that says I care. It gives samples of signs and logos and things. It gives some history, but we'll get free, and we got a video. If anybody wants that, we would love to give it to you. So just call me. Send out this one, 541-821-0131. I'll say it a second time for your memories, 541-821-0131. And we'll create a list and send this stuff out. And no matter what you come up with, you may have different ideas or different branding, but we do think we've had some experiences and some items that might help people rally. So thank you.
Very cool. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, everybody. We are done. Oh, one question came up about how long these will last. Time frame. I think we're shooting to be an hour and a half every time. Is that right, Julie? Yep, hour and a half. So that's your budgeted amount of time for the next one. Okay, everybody. Thanks again. God bless you all.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Take care.